Good morning, guys. This is Mark Saint, and this is Brazil Unsubtitled News Roundup, or BU Roundup, if you will. I'm here to present you a few of the headlines of the day. Today is March 3rd, 2022, and I want to help you make decisions about Brazil. I want to help you learn more from a Brazilian. I want to help you have access to the country through the newspapers and learn about what's going on in Brazil. I have separated for you 4 headlines, 4 reports from Estado de São Paulo, the most famous newspaper, or one of the most famous newspapers in Brazil. So let's go. I'm going to start, of course, talking about the COVID crisis, right? What is the situation in Brazil today? I want you to know that Brazil has had 335 new deaths in the last 24 hours, unfortunately, which makes us reach the horrible number of 650,000 deaths since the pandemic started. The interesting thing about this report is that an infectology professor from the University of the State of São Paulo, or Unesp, says that big part, 40 to 60% of the deaths here in Brazil could have been avoided had the federal and the state government aligned their talks over the problem and worked together. If you guys don't know, from the very first beginning of the pandemic, President Jair Bolsonaro and the governors, they didn't align their conversations. They didn't see eye to eye on how to proceed on the combat to the virus. So according to the epidemiologists, this caused a big impact to the whole thing. So 40 to 60% of the deaths could have been avoided had government, federal government and the states aligned their conversations, which is terrible to know, especially if you have a member of your family who lost their lives because of this pandemic. So that's terrible. What is the current vaccination number in the country? Okay, so according to this report as well, the report of the vaccines, so 72.3% of the population has received the whole immunization. So they have received the 2 jabs, and the number of people with at least 1 jab is the same as 80.4% of the total population. So if you consider the number 335, that's, I think it's a direct result of the rollout, of the vaccination rollout, right? Because if you guys don't know, in the beginning of the pandemic to the middle of the pandemic, first and second waves, the numbers were more than 2,000. We had days when we reached 4,000 deaths. So that was horrible. When you look at 335, it's still a lot. As I always say, if it was just one, it would be terrible anyways. But for me, it's a direct result of the vaccination. The second piece of news I want to bring to you guys so that you are informed about Brazil is in the politics section of the newspaper. And it talks about President Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo Bolsonaro, who's trying to mobilize the legislative inside the states to speed up the approval of the gun licensing for the CACs. The CACs is a group that is represented by the hunters here in Brazil, caçadores, atiradores desportivos, so the sport shooters, and also the colecionadores, collectors. So that's why the acronym CACs. He's trying to do that. He's trying to speed up the process, bringing some pressure to each state legislative in order to approve this. If you guys don't know, the gun licensing in Brazil is very restrict. You need to really prove that you depend upon a gun to survive or to perform your activity, your work activity. sport shooters can have until 60 weapons, 60 different weapons. It's important to highlight here that not only Eduardo Bolsonaro, the congressman, but also his father, the president, Jair Bolsonaro, they have always been on the front to defend the licensing for the civilian, for the normal civilian. They believe that every person should have a weapon in their homes, be that for protection or for anything else. So everybody is entitled to have a weapon. There are groups in Brazil that are against this idea, so the debate is really hot on this topic. So the next report here, the third one that I bring for you guys, is that the minister Ricardo Lewandowski from the Supreme Court, the Brazilian Supreme Court, has suspended a lawsuit against the former President Lula over irregularities on the purchase of Swedish jet fighters during Dilma Rousseff's government. Dilma Rousseff was the president that Lula nominated. Okay, she was the candidate that Lula nominated, who ended up becoming the president for the same party, the PT party. So there had been reports of irregularities of Lula's participation in the whole process. Brazil bought jet fighters from Sweden, and the report said that Lula committed many crimes while negotiating the jet fighters for President Dilma. The minister understood that Lava Jato, which was a whole operation in Brazil against the organized crime and corruption, who had the judge Sérgio Moro in the front of the combat against the corruption, didn't have the competence to judge Lula anymore because of his impartiality against the former president. So the interesting thing to see here is that Lula more and more has a clean slate to run for the presidency on the next October elections. It's interesting to say as well that according to the last poll, Lula has 40% vote intention against the 32 from the current president Bolsonaro. So some people will say that he will get back to Brasilia again, to Palácio do Planalto, which is the headquarters of our government. So he will definitely come back. And what a story he's writing, no? Going to prison, being accused and sentenced for crimes, being proved, having the accusations lifted for the impartiality of the judge, running for presidency again, and having a big possibility of winning. So we will see what's going to happen in the next months, right? But we're gonna be here to follow everything. So the last report that I have for the day is about Burger King Brazil, that says that they have instruments to mitigate the inflation impact in the sector here in Brazil. He says that even though the numbers were not good during the pandemic, just so you know, in 2019, the BK Brazil stocks had reached the peak of 23 reais each stock. And with the pandemic, of course, the stores had been all shut down, had been closed. And of course, the papers dropped due to the pandemic. But he says here that after the end of the first and the second waves, the stores reopened and they had numbers that were even more significant than before the pandemic. So, of course, a natural movement. People were desperate for being inside their homes for many months, so everything was possible again. So they decided to go back to restaurants, to go back to fast food restaurants, parks and stuff. Of course, this caused an impact in the numbers, in the sales, on the sales numbers in Brazil. So he says here that even with inflation, Burger King and the fast food chain tends to be a good option during periods like that, because if you compare restaurants and if you compare the fast food chains, it's much cheaper for you to consume inside places like that other than going to fancy restaurants. So I think he's right. I have heard this from many friends of mine who are always observing what's going on around, and they have the same opinion. There are families that are now going out for fast food restaurants to have a hamburger, some French fries, and the event is done. Okay, at least they can turn to their kids and say, we have gone out, we have eat now. So, and the guy doesn't spend so much money. So one important thing that you should know, last Thursday, the 24th, the company registered a net profit of 23.6 million reais in the fourth trimester of 2021, totally different from the loss of 97.3 million reais in the same period of 2020. So the net operational profit reached 913 million reais, which is 17.9% more than the fourth trimester of 2020. Guys, with this report, I wrap up, and I thank you so much for watching one more video, one more episode. This is the second episode of the BU News Roundup. This is the second episode of the BU News Roundup. I hope you stay with us here, not only on this series of videos, but the other ones that will come out eventually. Don't forget to click on the thumbs up to help us grow. Also subscribe to the channel to become part of this family and not to miss any episode about our economics, our politics, our way of life. Also click on the bell button to receive notifications, and thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye, guys.